Well, welcome to the 700 Club. You remember the time when the Woodward and Bernstein went after Richard Nixon, tried to drive him out of office? Well, it's still going on today, and it looks like Bob Woodward, who is an employee of the Washington Post, which has become one of the most rabid left-wing pieces, and you get the Post and the New York Times together, and you talk about fake news, you're looking at it. Well, the Trump sat down with Bob Woodward, who he spent hours talking to, and I don't know. He said, because I don't want to create a panic. And that's what President Trump says. He downplayed the coronavirus threat to the American people. That admission is part of a series of interviews that Bob Woodward got with the president. But why did the president agree to talk with Woodward? And how might these discussions come back to haunt him? The one thing you don't do is give your enemy a club to hit you with just before an election. Jenna Browder has that report.
President Trump says he sat down with Bob Woodward because it, quote, wasn't a big deal. But his admission that he downplayed the coronavirus to avoid panic now has the president on full defense mode. Last night, he called into Hannity on Fox News.
I'm the leader of the country. I can't be jumping up and down and scaring people. I don't want to scare people. I want people not to panic. And that's exactly what I did.
The newly released recordings are part of 18 interviews the president did with Woodward for his new book, Rage. They reveal the president understood the seriousness of the coronavirus as far back as February.
It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
That was the president on February 7th. But just 3 weeks later, speaking publicly.
This is a flu. This is like a flu. Within a couple of days, it's going to be down to close to zero.
And then in March, this admission to Woodward.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
On Twitter, the president is now calling Woodward's book a political hit job, reminding people he banned travelers from China early on, and that Democrats were slow to recognize the severity of the virus.
You should come to Chinatown. Precautions have been taken by our city. We know that there's a concern about tourism traveling all throughout the world, but we think it's very safe to be in Chinatown.
The White House says the president gave the interviews out of transparency. Dr. Anthony Fauci also came to Trump's defense.
Yeah, I don't think he ever distorted things that I spoke to him about.
Meanwhile, on the campaign trail,
he knew how dangerous it was. And while this deadly disease ripped through our nation, he failed to do his job on purpose. It was a life and death betrayal of the American people.
CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody, last night on Faith Nation.
How's this going to affect the president in his reelection campaign?
Well, it's not going to affect him at all in his reelection campaign. I mean, look, the politics are the politics. There's the Trump camp and there's the Biden camp, and there's very few undecided voters in the middle. So this is really more about getting out each other's base.
Biden has made the president's response to the coronavirus the core issue of his campaign. President Trump, maintaining his early action, saved millions of lives. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thanks, Jenna. You know, you talk about lying. Do you remember those famous statements? If you like your plan, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. The president lied through his teeth in trying to sell what was called the Affordable Care Plan, which became known as Obamacare. If you like your plan, you can keep it. He was lying to the people. And Joe Biden has a series of lies. When he was running the first time out, and, I remember years ago, we both went on a plane to New Hampshire together. I mean, he was going, I was going to a different, but he got through, he plagiarized the writings of a man named Neil Kinnock, who was one of the candidates for office in Great Britain. He took his speeches and took them word for word and claimed they were his own. I mean, this kind of, if you go back and look at the facts about it, I mean, there's a tissue of lies, one after the other, And he bragged about the fact that his crime bill was so strenuous and he locked a whole lot of people up. Now he's claiming I'm the best black friend that the American black people have ever had. I mean, somebody's got to hold him accountable, and I'm sure that's going to happen. Well, in other news, the president added 20 new names to the list of his potential Supreme Court picks. And some of them are rather surprising. John Jessup has more on that.
That's right, Pat. President Trump's new list has 3 sitting U.S. senators on it: Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, and Josh Hawley, all well-known conservatives. Paul Strand has the reaction.
President Trump surprised many by putting 3 senators on his new Supreme Court nominees list. But that might be helpful strategy in getting them confirmed.
It's a little bit harder for the Democrats to oppose one of their colleagues. I'm not saying that they wouldn't do it, but I think it's a little bit harder, really, on either side of the aisle to demonize somebody who you've worked with for the last number of years.
And Senate experience doesn't mean lack of judicial experience.
Both Senator Hawley and Cruz clerked for Supreme Court justices. Senator Cruz has argued several times in front of the United States Supreme Court, so I certainly think that they're qualified.
Levy says those on the list are the type who'll stick to the original meaning of the Constitution, whether it's popular or not.
Someone who has a track record of following those principles, even when it's going to anger the media, cultural, and academic elites of our nation.
Trump blasted the kind of Supreme Court he says Joe Biden would build.
It will fundamentally transform America without a single vote of Congress. Radical justices will erase the Second Amendment, silence political speech, and require taxpayers to fund extreme late-term abortion.
So could releasing his own list lose Biden more votes than it would get him?
I think that is certainly something that has probably crossed Joe Biden's mind. I know it has crossed Donald Trump's mind.
The type of people that the base would demand would be on that list would be so radical that it would scare away swing voters. And, if Biden's going to have a chance in November, he needs those swing voters.
Leftist groups are punching back. The Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights stating Trump has threatened our country's values and people with his intention to nominate more individuals who would decimate the Affordable Care Act and eviscerate Roe v. Wade. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul. And freshman Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri said he is uninterested in that gig. Pat?
I tell you what, the reality is there is no way the president is going to pull one of the Republicans out of the Senate when the margin in the Senate is as close as it is. I mean, I'm sure he's just tipping his hat toward Hawley and Cotton and saying, look, and Cruz, we think you're nice guys, and it just shows I love you. But there's no way that he's going to take a senator out of the Senate and put him on the Supreme Court. It's not going to happen. So just keep that in mind. But what he's doing is embarrassing Biden. And if Biden responds, then it'll be kind of tit for tat, and he will have gotten some brownie points. But anyhow, what he says is, I'm going to be true to the Constitution. And what we do need is people like Anthony Scalia, who's passed on, but he was a strict constructionist. And we need people who want to be strictly to the construction of how the framers of our Constitution intended that law to be written. It is not a fluid document that is at the whim of the sociological trends of our day. It shouldn't be. It should be something that's a rock that we can rely on, and we want justices who back that up. But Trump has put some good guys on. He's got Gorsuch on. He's got others on who are strong conservatives. And if Roberts would come along, he surprised everybody. But nevertheless, Trump would have a working majority if he got Kavanaugh. If he has one more that he can put on, I mean, it'll be a solid block of justices for the next 10, 15 years. It's very important.
Very important. We hope Roberts takes that strong role.
I think, Roberts, he was working with Jay Sekulow, and Jay said, man, he's really good. He's one of our guys. And then all of a sudden on some of these issues, he's voted with the liberal wing. But nevertheless, by the way, I am pleased to report that Justice Thomas is going to be chairing the moot court competition at Regent University, and he's agreed to do that.
You get some top-notch people.
Oh, the very best.
Yes.
It's incredible. And I have a bit of news. Can I give you my news?
I wish you would.
I am a great-grandfather many times over, and yesterday my wonderful granddaughter Megan had a little baby boy.
She did.
That's my 18th great-grandchild. And
when you all gather, you need a park.
But isn't that wonderful? I mean, I can celebrate.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, that's number, I'm trying to count, I think it's number 18 great-grandchild.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
And his name is going to be Harlan, and the father's grandfather was governor of Wisconsin, I believe, named Harlan, and there was a Harlan on the Supreme Court. So
that's wonderful.
That's Daniel
well,
Harlan.
Congratulations.
Isn't that great?
Yes, it is.
Congratulations to Megan, who's a very, very sweet girl.
Yes.
You know, God is blessed, but that to have that many great-grandchildren.
Yes, and grands.
Yeah, well, when I start getting great, I feel like Abraham. All right, John.
Well, congratulations on number 18, Pat. The Family Research Council is sounding off about big tech discrimination after the company responsible for sharing its weekly broadcast abruptly terminated their contract. The Pray Vote Stand broadcast is aimed at educating Christian voters about the upcoming 2020 election. But just 1 hour before it was set to air, Mobile Cause canceled its agreement with FRC. In a letter, the company cited the Southern Poverty Law Center's designation of FRC as a hate group as the reason. FRC President Tony Perkins told CBN's Faith Nation it's because of his group's conservative Christian worldview.
This is what I believe. I think Mobile Cause apparently has a bigger cause, and that is their allegiance to the leftist ideology that is seeking to silence conservatives, and in this case, religious conservatives.
Perkins also said this is part of a trend of big tech silencing conservatives, Pat, in the run-up to the presidential election.
You know, this Southern Poverty Law Center is a left-wing group, and interestingly enough, it has been chosen to give the curriculum for one of the counties in Virginia for little third graders. Yeah, the Southern Poverty Law Center has got a curriculum, and the people in Fairfax County, Virginia, want to put that in to teach to train third graders how to be radicals. I mean, it's just horrible. But this group, well, but the fact that they would designate somebody a radical, extremist group because they stand for biblical values makes them extreme, and they're the ones who are able to designate. It's just horrible. Okay, John.
Pat, protests continuing in Rochester, New York last night over the death of Daniel Prude, despite the police chief's announcement that he and several members of his team are resigning. Backed by Black Lives Matter, the demonstrators now calling for the mayor's resignation and defunding the police. Well, given the tactics and growing destruction of ongoing protests, critics are raising questions about the goals of the organization behind the movement. As CBN News and other outlets have reported, the three founders of Black Lives Matter identify themselves as Marxist. And one, Alicia Garza, names convicted cop killer and domestic terrorist as her inspiration. The Washington Examiner reports some of BLM's funding comes from the left-wing group Thousand Currents, which includes a convicted terrorist on its board of directors. CBN News spoke with Quinn Hillier, a commentary writer for the Examiner.
Their ultimate goal is cultural revolution, and it's left-wing Marxist revolution at that. It is to completely upend the society, upend the capitalist system entirely, to institute a radical redistribution, not just of wealth, but of all sorts of things, of power, et cetera, and to create their openly Marxist or communist society. That's what they are. That's what they say they want to do.
The organization also opposes the biblical definition of family and celebrates homosexuality and transgenderism. Its website lists among its goals disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. It is important to note that while many leaders believe that Black Lives Matter is an important sentiment, they don't necessarily agree with the tactics and ultimate goals of the BLM organization. Pat, back to you.
Well, you know, it's amazing that these athletes are getting sucked into this, and so-called fellow travelers and even businesses. But, you know, the athletes used to be terribly, admired by all of society. They had a very, very positive rating. That rating has gone to negative because of their association with Black Lives Matter. It's not just the statement. Of course, Black Lives Matter. Of course, we care about oppression against poor people. Everybody who's got any sense would do that. They don't like police brutality or some of those things. But that legitimate thing has been hijacked by these radicals, and they're using that label to put forth an agenda, and people need to be aware of it. They're talking about Marxist communism. They're talking about destroying the nuclear family. They're talking about destroying essentially Christianity as being racist. Now, all the way through, they want to upend the capitalist structure and destroy America. Now, if some athlete wants to get an endorsement, if I were a corporate head, I wouldn't give 10 cents to pay him to endorse my product. Why would I want Colin Kaepernick to endorse Wheaties or whatever it is I'm selling? But I think some of the big corporations are going along. But people need to understand that this is a stalking horse for a very, very radical anti-family, anti-God agenda. And you, whoever's watching, people should be aware that they're not just standing with the poor, oppressed black people. Of course we want to stand with oppressed people against police brutality. Of course we do. But we don't want to go along with a lesbian, anti-family, anti-capitalist, Marxist revolution. We don't want that for America. John?
Pat, in other news, 3 people died as a wildfire spread through Northern California, carving a 25-mile path of destruction. Gusting winds fueled flames to 6 times its previous size. Hundreds, perhaps even thousands of structures have been destroyed, and some 20,000 people in 3 counties are under evacuation orders. In Oregon, the governor there saying it's possibly the greatest loss of human life and property to wildfires in that state's history. Pat, just devastating.
Well, folks, again, we need to pray for those people and help them. This is an unbelievable tragedy, and the Santa Ana winds may be flaming this stuff. Hopefully there's some snow falling in Colorado that may have had a tendency to tamp some of these fires down, but they're just burning out of control. And it's one of the worst tragedies that's hit a nation. And it's like our country's being overwhelmed. We've got the coronavirus. We've got these terrible fires. We've got the possibility of major financial destruction. We need a move of God. And we're going to be talking to somebody, Jonathan Cahn, about what his solution is to it later on in this program.